On the night of July 1st, 1951, Mrs. Reeser, a 67-year-old woman, was wearing a rayon nightgown, bedroom slippers, and a housecoat, and was about to go to bed. This is how she was last seen by her son Richard and her friend and landlady, Mrs. Carpenter. At 8 o'clock the next morning, a messenger boy from Western Union came to deliver a telegram for Mrs. Reeser, but was unable to get an answer when he knocked on the door. The boy sought Mrs. Carpenter to help him, and the two went to the room, but when she tried to open the doorknob was hot. Alarmed, Mrs. Carpenter ran outside to get help, and some nearby house painters were able to force the door open. When they did, they were met with an immense blast of heat. The inside of the apartment was extremely hot, despite the windows being open, and in a small corner of the room was the burnt remains of a chair, and what was left of Mrs. Reeser. Only the coil springs remained of the chair, but all that was left of Mrs. Reeser was ashes, bits of bone, a severely shrunken skull, and her left foot, which, strangely, was untouched. Not even her slipper was marred. As for the room, there was a ring of soot that started 3 to 4 feet up the wall, like the results of a long-burning candle. The electric outlets above the soot line were melted, along with some pink candles and a plastic cup in the bathroom. The mirror that was hung on the wall was cracked, and the wall clock had stopped, signifying there had been a short circuit at approximately 4:20 a.m. Below the soot line, everything was intact, with the exception of the small burned area where Mrs. Reeser had been sitting. When police and firefighters arrived, they were baffled. Experts estimated that for her to become so completely cremated would have required temperatures around 3,000 degrees for several hours, and an anthropologist who investigated deaths by fires said the circumstances were contrary to normal experiences. No chemicals were found in the apartment that could have ignited, nor was there any lightning that night. It wasn't electric either, since the melting outlets blew the fuses before the fire started. There was no widespread smoke. Only Mrs. Carpenter had smelled anything unusual, but had assumed it was only the water pump overheating. The fire was eventually attributed to a neglected cigarette, but too many questions arose from this. Why didn't the fire burn the whole room? Why was the stack of newspapers besides the chair untouched? Why wasn't there any smoke or odors? Only Mrs. Carpenter had smelled anything odd. The true cause of the fire was never determined, and to this day remains a mystery.